and welcome to Module 2 of the High Performance Leadership Mini Program. In this module, we're going to cover the critical element of courage. In Module 1, we spoke about trust, and in that module, we covered a key principle called vulnerability. Now, a lot of people mix up vulnerability with courage. So being vulnerable is the action, whereas courage is the fuel that sits behind that vulnerability, behind that action. So what is courage? Well, courage is that quality of mind or spirit, that virtue or attribute that enables a person or a team of people to face adversity despite the presence of fear. We quite often notice courage manifest itself in a physical sense. So when we think of courage, we quite often think of people like soldiers, police officers, firefighters, frontline medical staff, paramedics, or even sports people. And we see in that context that courage emboldens and inspires those people around them. But in this module, I really want to focus more on moral courage, that courage that doesn't require any physical risk. This sort of courage is not that easy to define and not so easy to spot, but there are plenty of great examples around us. So we see people like Jeff Bezos, like Elon Musk, Richard Branson, the likes of Nelson Mandela, and many others who have displayed moral courage to move themselves and their teams towards great missions and incredible goals. In this context, courage is what separates leaders from managers. And exceptional moral courage is what separates leaders, average leaders, from high performance leaders. In these examples, we see people who have embraced a boldness where they've accepted risk, but in a responsible way, where they've set goals and missions that are not about survival and they're not about improvement, they're about transformation. Now here's the thing, courage can't really be taught. It has to be experienced. It needs to be given time and space to expand and to grow in you and in the people who you lead. This comes through gradual exposure to smaller fears and the overcoming of those smaller fears so that you gain a sustained reservoir of courage from which to move forward. In this way, courage inspires teams and stakeholders. A courageous leader clears the way, clears the path for courageous team members. When a high-performance leader models moral courage, a culture of courage starts to build. What we see is courageous teams go for goals that are transformative. They confront issues, they critically test ideas and concepts, and they become comfortable with fear. In fact, they become comfortable with being uncomfortable. When we look at the greatest feats of mankind, we can see that they've all been fueled by courage. It took courage to put a man on the moon. It took courage to take the first powered flight in an aeroplane. It took courage to build the pyramids, and it took great courage for explorers to leave their homelands and to explore unknown lands. All greatness is fueled by courage. As high-performance leaders, courage is the virtue or the attribute that we most want to embed in ourselves and in the culture of our team. As high-performance leaders, we want to be transformative, not mediocre. So, in this module, we're going to look at the three key principles that sit behind courage, and they are authenticity, creative friction, and bold missions. So now what we'll do is we'll head over and have a look at authenticity. I'll see you there. There's been a lot written about authenticity and about authentic leadership. Everything from shallow pieces of work, pop psychology, through to really great academic works in the field of psychology and philosophy, with some big names contributing to the debate. For us, as high-performance leaders, it's really important that we understand what it is and why it's important. So what is authenticity? Well, for our purposes, it's about whether our actions are congruent with our beliefs and our values despite any external pressure. Now, there's a relationship here, obviously, to courage, because it takes courage to stand in our own skin, to own our values and our beliefs despite external pressure. A great leader will stand up for what they believe to be right. They'll stand up for their beliefs, they'll stand up for their values. That is authentic leadership. Now, I would warrant a guess that we've all been in the presence of an authentic leader. You can feel that they are authentic because they stand up for what they believe in. They operate in a way that is congruent with who they are. They are uniquely their own. They have this feeling of solidness around them as a leader. And no matter whether you agree with them or even whether you like them, they command respect because of who they are and how they operate. But there's a deeper level to this. An authentic leader knows themselves and they can operate as themselves. They can be themselves and they can be comfortable doing that. And that models a certain type of courage that then engenders trust from their people. One of the issues that we face as leaders, and I've seen it with a lot of the leaders that I've coached over the past decade, is that they can't quite put their finger on what it is that they believe and what their values are. Now, if you know your values and you live by them, then you're okay. But for a lot of people, they can't narrow those things down. And even if they can, beliefs and values can shift as we grow and experience life. So in this instance, what do? Well, here's something that I've found that works with a lot of my clients. If we don't know what our values and our beliefs are, it's often quite easy to pin down what they are not. And what I mean by this is that as we go through life, if we notice the things that give us that distinct, uncomfortable feeling in our chest or in our mind, in our heart, in our soul, then we've come across a trigger that will lead us to what is one of our beliefs or our values. When we come across or participate in behaviour that doesn't quite sit with our beliefs or our values, we can often feel that heavy negativity or that sense of distaste or discomfort that lingers for a little while. It's a feeling that's very difficult to put words around, but I'm sure that you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you've felt it. Now, when you feel that, don't dismiss it. Hold on to it and start questioning what it is that made you feel that way. It will be something that you don't want to be. If you can nail that down, then you can turn it around, backward engineer it to give you what your value is. Here's an example. If we feel a certain distaste or disgust or a disturbance or an uneasy feeling after being involved in something like gossip, then that's a good indicator of what one of our values might be. Hold on to that feeling and start to get curious about it. Start to ask yourself, what was it exactly that I didn't like about that? And then start to ask, well, if I didn't like that, what would I like it to be? So if you don't like gossip, if it gives you that nasty feeling deep down inside that lingers for a little while, it could quite possibly be that you have a feeling that it was cowardly or that it was unfair or unjust. If we reverse engineer those feelings, then it's possible that you have a belief or a value that's something around justice, fairness, or integrity. Those things might be important to you. Now, once you've identified that, the game begins. Start to notice the pattern of when you feel like that, when you feel negative, see if it attaches to what you've just identified. Or if you see the value of integrity or justice play out, if it makes you feel good, then this is a good indicator that that is the value that you align with. So the journey towards authentic leadership, which is critical to being a high-performance leader, is all about understanding who you are and then showing up in that way to the world, and in particular to the team that you lead and the stakeholders who rely on you. Now, as a leader, there will be times that pop up where your beliefs and your values are rubbing up against what you have to do, the mission that you have to achieve. In other words, it just won't feel right. Now, this is quite common in extreme situations like war or policing or emergency medicine. From personal experience, this is an uncomfortable place to be, but sometimes it's just unavoidable. I've had many situations where the course of action that I had to take did not sit well with my beliefs or my values, but I had to take it. Now, these are the situations that now, 10 or 12 years later, 15 years later, I still think about whether I did the right thing. At the end of the day, there will be some situations where you have to run with a course of action that doesn't quite sit right. But these should be at the extreme. So an authentic leader is a courageous leader. And we've just discussed why courage in leadership is critical. Now what I'd like you to do is to pause the video, take out your pen and some paper and answer these questions. First of all, what are your beliefs and your values? Try and get really clear on that. And secondly, what's your plan over the next 7 days to turn up as a more authentic leader in your workplace? Once you've completed that, restart the video and I'll meet you in the next section, which is all about creative friction. In my experience, way too many leaders aim for a harmonious workplace. Now that sounds like a strange thing to say because so many people desire a harmonious workplace. But the truth is, it just doesn't fit well with a high-performance team. What we're aiming for is a respectful workplace, not necessarily a harmonious one, because harmony equals mediocrity. It doesn't encourage people to test ideas or concepts. Harmony encourages a workplace that is an echo chamber. Harmony doesn't encourage critical analysis, and it also doesn't encourage innovation, curiosity, or any form of boldness. It encourages people really to shut up. And then at the other end of the scale from harmony is the toxic workplace that is out of control with criticism that's destructive and unhelpful. An environment where personalities are attacked rather than ideas or concepts. What I call creative friction is that sweet spot between the two extremes of harmony and toxicity. Creative friction is where ideas, concepts, plans are critically analysed without the team falling into this destructive conflict. Creative friction is all about getting the right solution, the best solution. It's not about agreeing with everything, and it's not about attacking individuals and defending each other's egos. And whilst we're on the topic of egos, this can be a difficult thing for people who have a fragile ego. In my experience, including with some of the clients that I coach, this can be really difficult, where they feel like if their ideas or their concepts or their plans are critically analysed, that it's a personal attack on them. So how do we move those fragile egos into a place where they can be more robust and accept that the criticism is about the idea, not about the person? The answer is in two parts. Firstly, to be mission focused, and we'll deal more with that in Module 5 of this course. But the second part is to develop a sense of curiosity, to develop a mindset where you look forward to putting an idea forward so it can be deconstructed in front of you. In the deconstruction of that idea or that plan or that concept, you will start learning about the way you think, the way that you come up with concepts and ideas, and also about the way that your team thinks. The end result will be a far more robust idea, plan, or concept. And the second order effect is that you'll all learn and become better at working together and developing plans, ideas, and concepts. I often use the analogy of where I ask one of my clients to imagine that an idea is a machine, like an engine of a car. It's an inanimate object. There's no feelings about it. You've put the thing together. Now what you're doing is throwing it in the middle of the group and you're asking them to pull it apart and see if it was put together or developed in an effective and efficient way and to see if they can make it a better product. Now, this requires a curious mindset, but what's really interesting is I find that people who embrace it start to get excited when faults or inadequacies are found within their plan, their idea, or their concept, because they know that it was found here by the team before it was launched into being. And so it's going to be more robust when they head off. As high performance leaders, we need to grasp that friction. We need to make it creative so that it produces a better result than what we previously had. We need to almost enjoy it. Now, when you start exploring this with your team, let me point you back to Module 1, where we spoke about rules of engagement. Take another look at them, make sure they're clear in your mind when you start to encourage this creative friction amongst the team. So that closes this part on the key principle of creative friction. What I'd like you to do now is to pause the video, take out a pen and a piece of paper and answer this question. What actions do you need to take in the next 7 days to increase the creative friction in your team? Once you've answered that, restart the video and I'll meet you in the next section, which is all about bold missions. I'll see you there. The final key principle we're going to look at within the critical element of courage is bold missions. Now, the vast majority of humans are inspired by a challenge. If you're looking to engender courage within your team, the best way to fail is to set a goal or a mission that is not going to stretch them. The second part of this is that as a leader, it takes some courage to set a mission that may set you up to fail. But a bold mission that excites the team will negate that gravitational pull that requires willpower. You'll hear me talk a lot about missions instead of goals or objectives, and we're going to talk about that more in Module 5. But for the moment, just accept that when I say mission, I mean a goal or an objective. So it's the sort of thing that you might be working towards with your team today or over the next week or over the coming months. I don't mean a company or an organisation mission statement. I really mean a goal. And setting a really bold mission or a stretch goal gives off an excitement of possibility for people. It's a really powerful motivator. It's especially powerful when each individual knows how they're contributing to achieving that bold goal. Adversity or challenge tends to bind people together. They find a unique collective identity under adversity. Setting challenging missions or bold missions allows the team an opportunity to bind together, to face a common challenge, a common adversity. What you'll find is that the more bold your missions are, the more challenging they are, the more people will tend to bind together. It tends to enrich people's lives because they have something that's bigger than themselves. In fact, they have something that's bigger than the team, and so they come together. The other aspect of a bold mission is that it's going to force you as a leader to expand your vision of what's possible. And that's also going to be true of your team. They'll go from looking in a blinkered way to looking in a much more expansive way. And this is where creativity and innovation starts to blossom within the team. And this will start to transform who the individuals are and how they see themselves. And also, it'll transform who the team is and how it sees itself. Bold missions will force the individuals and the team to have a look at themselves and to confront the weaknesses and the deficiencies that they see. The end result here is a much more cohesive and stronger team. Now, as the leader, it goes without saying really that it's we, not me. So you're setting bold missions for you as a member of your team. You're not setting a bold mission for the team to separate and do themselves. Lead from the center. The thing about bold missions is that they avoid that soul-destroying life of mediocrity, where a lack of challenge results in the atrophy of the soul of individuals and of the team. High performance teams and high performance leadership is based on the notion that the obstacle is the way. In other words, the greater the challenge, the greater the growth. And not only the greater the growth, the greater the cohesiveness of the team. As I mentioned at the start, to set a bold mission is going to take courage, but it will generate courage. The bolder the mission, the higher the risk. And the higher the risk, the more chance of failure. And that will be failure of you as a leader and failure of your team. The trick is to understand that risk is manageable. Mediocrity is not. As a high performance leader, it's up to you to inspire through your vision, inspire through setting bold missions where people are inspired to go beyond what they've ever done before. That concludes our look at this key principle of setting a bold mission for your team. Now what I'd like you to do is pause the video, take out your pen and your paper and answer these questions. The first one is, what missions have you set that aren't challenging enough? I want you to identify them and write them down. And secondly, over the next 7 days, I want you to sit down and reframe all of the missions that you have in your workplace, and I want you to make them more challenging. Once you've done that, restart the video and I'll meet you for the summary of this module. Well done, team, on finishing module 2, which was all about the critical element of courage. In this module, we had a look at courage and we identified that moral courage as a leader is what separates average leaders from high performance leaders. We also identified that courage is the attribute or quality that leads to transformation, not just an attitude of survival or steady state improvement. The first key principle was authenticity. And we identified that that was all about knowing who we are and aligning our actions with our beliefs and our values. The second key principle was creative friction. This was all about having the courage to embed a culture where ideas, concepts and plans were able to be openly criticised without being destructive to the team. And the third key principle was about bold missions, where we identified that challenging the team would lead to greatness. So in the next module, module number 3, we're going to talk about the critical element of commitment. I'll see you there.